tonight.
Joy, I think we're ready for you to kick us off.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the She Opened the Door Presents, the Entrepreneurship Essentials with our very own Barbara Roberts. My name is Joy Fairbanks. I'm an alumna, and I'm currently serving as the Director of Innovation, Programming, and Partnerships for the Long Beach Accelerator, which I helped launch. It's a West Coast public-private partnership. We just held our in-person demo yesterday for our fourth cohort, and we'll hold a virtual demo day tomorrow. And I welcome any of you to attend if you're interested. Prior to my recent relocation to the West Coast, I served as a faculty member of Columbia Business School, where I organized the inaugural Hacking for Humanity cross-campus startup hackathon and launched the Impact Venture Incubator course. Our featured speaker this evening served as an invaluable resource for my course. I am a proud Columbia alumni and a parent as well. I graduated from the business school, and my youngest son recently graduated from Columbia College. I feel very strongly about supporting the Columbia community, and my doors are always open to founders, investors, ecosystem builders, and anyone who wants to connect with me. I feel strongly about the three words that open this conference: build, belong, bond. I will put my LinkedIn information into the chat as well. We are thrilled that so many of you have been able to join us virtually to continue the tradition that we established with the first She Opened the Door event in 2018. For those of you who do not know, She Opened the Door refers to the name of Winifred Edgerton Merrill, the first woman to earn a Columbia degree, and how she opened the door for those who came after. As an entrepreneur, educator, and investor, I am very excited about this evening's program and the opportunity to learn more from Barbara's entrepreneurial expertise. So before we start, a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. Your camera and mic will remain off for the entirety of the webinar, but we encourage you to please make use of the chat box function to connect with each other. Please introduce yourselves, your school affiliation, from where you are joining us this evening. And if you wish, share your LinkedIn profiles as well. You may use the chat box to ask questions during the presentation. I will be moderating that. And we would love to hear from you and want to ensure that any questions that you have, we can get to. This virtual event will be recorded and distributed to attendees after the event. So now it's my honor to introduce Barbara Roberts, our esteemed presenter for the evening. For over 10 years as entrepreneur in residence at Columbia Business School, and Hofstra University, Barbara has taught entrepreneurship and innovation and helped hundreds, literally hundreds, entrepreneurs launch their companies. She's also a well-known speaker and writer about all stages of entrepreneurship, family businesses, and the economic progress of women. Previously an economist by training, Barbara held senior positions on Wall Street and was the first woman to serve on Dean Witter's board of directors. She then built and sold the award-winning stock photography company, FPG International, now part of Getty Images, which we're familiar with, and then the museum audio tour company, Acoustiguide, which I used quite often, which is now part of Espro Acoustiguide. She currently serves on several private boards and has served as chair of the Federal Reserve Bank, New York's Business and Agricultural Advisory Committee. She's a member of New York Angels and the Suffolk County Planning Commission and former New York chair of Tiger 21. Barbara has developed and delivered numerous programs to support women, minority, immigrant, and vet-owned businesses sponsored by the Small Business Administration, New York City Economic Development Corporation, and Columbia and Hofstra Universities. And in July, appeared on the cover of Cranes as a civic hero in diversity and inclusion. She is the author of 4 white papers about entrepreneurs, Life After an Exit, Light Paths, The Owner's Journey, and Women's Entrepreneurial Journeys. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Barbara Roberts. Welcome, Barbara.
Great. Thank you, Joy. It's so great to see you. I am so honored to be back talking to you. As you may know, I actually spoke live at She Opened the Door to Entrepreneurship back in May, and I am incredibly honored to be invited back to more or less repeat some of the points I was making there. The world has changed a bit since May, particularly for women, and also add a little bit more about the things that I've come to understand about entrepreneurship. So first, I always like to start with really stressing that I absolutely believe that every one of you on this call was put on the planet for a unique, special purpose. I also believe that entrepreneurship can be an amazing way to find and to develop what that purpose is. In my world, I wake up every morning with the purpose of asking myself 2 questions. One, what can I do today to help women secure our fair share of the economic and political pie? And what can I do today to help someone start a company, grow one, innovate, solve a problem, and create some new wealth and new jobs? So obviously, I'm truly honored to be talking to you again, and it was so easy to answer those questions today that hopefully something I say in the next half hour or so will help answer you on those 2 questions. Most of us on the call today are women. I think there are a few men, but I would like to just take a moment to talk about women's economic history and the road to our entrepreneurship journey. And then I will share with you 12 tips that I would tips are almost myths about entrepreneurship. So let me just start a little bit on my the women's economic journey. I was honored that Joy said that she was welcoming one of our own, but I would like to highlight, I actually don't have a Columbia education. And I also don't have an MBA or any master's degree. My entire journey has been built on a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Goucher College. But my first connection to Columbia actually was in 2008 when I was hired by the Columbia Business School to start the Columbia Harlem Community Business Program to help the businesses that had to move out of 125th Street to make way for the Manhattanville campus. That summer, it was also the summer that the world fell apart and TARP money went to Wall Street. And that summer, Columbia Business School students could not get internships on Wall Street because of all the federal money that was going in to save that industry. That summer, I actually was asked by the head of Columbia Business School to start the first summer startup lab for the school. And I'm very, very proud and happy to say that both of those programs now are still going strong. And also to build on Joy, it actually is not an exaggeration to say that I have helped hundreds of businesses launched. I've been doing this a long time. 2007 is like 15 years ago, and it's been a lot of entrepreneurs and people I've talked to. I also have written 4 white papers, as Joy has shared with you. And in each of those white papers, I did at least 10 to 15 cases on successful entrepreneurs. So I kind of consider myself a bit of an expert on what works, what doesn't, and also have my own take on some of the things that happened. So first thing I'd like to do is, as we celebrate, She Opened the Door to Entrepreneurship, is to celebrate our accomplishments. And I'm asking particularly the women in this audience to think about your life. And I guarantee there is something that you were the first woman in your family to open the door to. Any woman who has been born or came to the United States since World War II has had extraordinary opportunity that I would like to share with you. In my life, I actually had many firsts, but the first thing that I most love about this idea of first is that we are what I call everyday revolutionaries. Sally Helgeson used that term to describe early baby boomers who were literally doing something every single day for the first time. I always like to share my own story that my first was that in second grade, it came to the Friday, I was the tallest person child in the class, and it made absolutely total sense to me that the tallest person should carry the American flag. Unfortunately, I was told that only boys could carry the American flag. So in second grade, I led my first sit-down strike until girls could carry the American flag, and we were successful within an hour. So since then, I have totally enjoyed the notion of being an everyday revolutionary. On my first job, there was a staircase that only men were supposed to go up and down. I love being the first to run up that one. I was the first woman to wear pants to an office. We had to wear skirts in those old days. The first to have an American Express card that was issued to a woman. That happened to me when I was well into my 20s. Before that time, you needed a man to guarantee your card. Every Wall Street Journal job that I had was actually the first. In 1968, with the New York Times eliminated for the first time help wanted men and women. So it's been an amazing time. And real quick, 1920, we got the right to vote. 1954, we got the Brown versus Board of Education giving us school segregation. 1964, we actually were supposed to get total equal rights. However, as I mentioned before, all newspapers did help wanted men and help wanted women until well into the 70s. Title IX actually happens in 1972, which guarantees the rights to sports. But I do want to highlight that it was January 12th of 1973 that Roe versus Wade gave us the right to control our bodies. And in actual fact, we didn't have the right to control our money until later that year. Actually, it was in 1974, which was the first time that it made it illegal to discriminate against women for credit for consumer loans or a home mortgage. But 34 years ago, in 1988, that was the year that an act of Congress called the Women's Business Ownership Act made it illegal for banks and others to require a man's signature for a woman's commercial loan. I really like to highlight that because sometimes I think we get a little feeling that we're way far behind and whatever, but I really like to highlight that it's only been 34 to 35 years that we really and honest and truly had the educational rights, the legal rights, the financial rights, the rights to some sports programs to create our wealth. And in my mind, we absolutely should be celebrating where we are. It's incredible where women are in the female founder world. But I also, of course, would like to just highlight that we got the right to Roe versus Wade before we got that right to control our money. And we can't be naive that there are some pretty extreme segments in this country that actually also might be interested in taking away those rights. So I just always like to, particularly right now, remind everyone it is so important to vote this midterms, and we really have to keep an eye, not just on Roe versus Wade, but there could be other erosions to the rights that we've gained in the last 35 years if we're not that careful. So let me just put that aside as just a little kind of reminder and talk about entrepreneurship. One of the most incredible, my favorite ideas right now is the idea that COVID made absolutely every human being on the planet an entrepreneur. Everyone learned how to react to disruption. Everyone came to learn what innovation is. Innovation simply is looking at a problem, seeing what's in existence to help with that problem, and figuring out a way to put things together in a new way to get things moving. In the first month of April 2020, right after COVID, I was asked to talk a lot because I had run companies during 9/11 and also the 2008 meltdown. And I was asked to share my thoughts on crisis management. But I quickly realized that COVID was totally different. And I started calling it chaos management. And in this chaos is our incredible opportunity. Absolutely everything on this planet has been disrupted, and there is absolutely no clear answer of how everything should work now. So certainly coming into this time with an attitude of wanting to innovate, putting together what is here in a new way to solve problems, I just really would share that this is an absolute extraordinary time for entrepreneurship. So with that sort of as a little background to my general thinking about where we are, I put together a quick PowerPoint here where I'd like to walk you through 12 tips, observations, or maybe even myth destroyers about entrepreneurship that I have come to see in my work overall these years, and particularly when I've done deep dives into our entrepreneurs' cases. So let me take a second and share a screen. And Joy, if there's any questions on what I said so far, I could pause for a second.
No questions yet.
Okay, so let me share the screen. Okay, are we ready? We're going, right? Is that up correctly for you?
And you need to put it on presenters mode, and then
Yeah,
we're good.
I just did that. Let me move you over here. Close this. Oh, I'm sorry. We tested 2 seconds ago and it was working fine. Okay. Okay, I've got to go. Look, we just lost it. Oh, shoot.
Barbara, I'll go ahead and share my screen for you.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we could go to the first slide, please. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about is that entrepreneurs do not build companies to become rich. It's a real kind of myth in the world that entrepreneurs do this. And what I love to stress, and the one thing that I have really learned about the entrepreneurs when I've done my cases, is that entrepreneurs are like artists. Like Van Gogh, when he painted Starry, Starry Night, he did not think about whether or not he should ask some more blue to the canvas, or whether or not he should do something else. That's the way an entrepreneur builds a company. We are just obsessed about what we have to do. So the second point that I would like to make is that entrepreneurs are absolutely obsessed by the problem. And who has it? We are not obsessed about the solution. And one of the real things that we have learned in the last 10 to 15 years as we've developed the art of teaching entrepreneurship is that you start with an absolute obsession and description of the problem you want to solve. And when you start, if you yourself are coming up with an idea of how that problem should be solved, it actually is just a hypothesis that really needs to go out and be tested. And certainly it's the idea of being incredibly active and curious as the beginning of being a true entrepreneur. The third thing that you kind of have to think about when you're starting a company is whether or not you're creating a painkiller or a vitamin. So let's just think about that for a second. If you are creating a vitamin, that means you're creating something to prevent the problem. Obviously, if you're creating a painkiller, that is something that's going to take away the pain when the problem comes. Now, if you think about this, many times a vitamin, something that's going to prevent the problem, is something that you would have recurring revenue, maybe though a little bit less, that would be happening over and over again. But if you are creating the painkiller, you probably would tend to be creating something that people would pay more for, but you might not have as many sales of it. So for those of you that may already have a company or business going, I think that's a really interesting idea to think about. Again, exactly what your problem is you're solving, being obsessed about solving that problem, and then deciding whether or not it's a vitamin or a painkiller. One of my observations about businesses that have really survived during COVID was that you can think about businesses in your neighborhood, like the restaurant that stayed open. They were obsessed about their problem and purpose in your community. I noticed where I live in Greenwich Village, that the restaurants that always were the ones where the community gathered, that was always the friendliest places, that always the restaurant owner knew their importance was to build a community gathering place, they were the ones that were the first to figure out a way to have takeout, set up outside tables, figure out how they were continuing to solve the problem and create their purpose of being a center gathering place. So all three of these ideas of not being driven to become rich, to be driven by the problem, to think about problem, no matter what's happening, what is it you're solving, leads you to having an openness of flexibility that will let you survive. Now, the fourth thing that I wanted to talk about is that if you think about it, business schools were offering what was known as an MBA, Masters of Business Administration. It actually was started about 50 years ago at Harvard by Henry Ford, and he was trying to start a school that would teach people how to be managers of people assembling things on the car line. And basically what that was, it was really management. Most of the big business schools actually did not have very strong entrepreneurship and innovation programs until that 2007 and 8 meltdown. But since then, we've gotten pretty clear on how we teach and what the essence of starting a company is. In the old days, business schools tended to teach, and the art was to write a 40-page business plan, to sit alone in your apartment on your typewriter, doing all your own sort of analysis, keeping it a total secret of what you were up to. all of the new models that really are shown to work the best for starting a company are what we call business model canvas, lean launchpad, design thinking. All of them start with the idea that you're obsessed by the problem, you're obsessed by finding out who has that problem, and you are obsessed by testing your hypothesis of how you're going to solve it. So if we just take a look at the next slide, that will be a sample of what a business model canvas is. This is something very easy to find online. If you go to steveblank.com, who is one of the absolute top first experts in teaching this way of starting a company, you can actually download hours and hours of courses and help on answering these questions. But again, the basics of starting a company now is to think of the problem you want to solve. What is the value proposition? What is it that you are going to do to solve that problem? Who do you help? How are you going to interact with them? How are you going to reach them? And how you're going to make money. So we look at that right side of the canvas, it is putting together sort of your idea and implementing it to connect to the outside world. If we look at the left side of the canvas, these are all the questions that you need to answer to start a business to really get it going. So it's what exactly will you have to do? What do you need? Who will you help? And what will it cost? Many people, when they hear about this process of starting a company and they think they have this incredible idea to solve a problem, instantly say, well, I can't do this. I can't answer all these questions and go out and ask people if I'm on the right track before I start it. They're going to steal my idea. And the point that I very much would like to make is that only you, as a unique person on this planet, can solve the problem the way you're meant to solve it. The only way that you're going to be successful in starting a company is by getting the opinion of what you want to do from as many people as possible. You use your mind, your brain, your curiosity to listen to all of those solutions, and that is the way that you solve. You want to be flexible, you want to be customer focused, and you want to be driven by the problem. Listen, 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 and accept that your first idea must and should change. You should be ecstatic when you figure out that you're wrong on your first idea and that it's time to pivot, that you're beginning to see and understand really what people want. That is the art. So the fifth thing that I'd like to talk about, which often is overlooked, if we go to the fifth slide, please, that's great, what can possibly happen to your company? I think many people, when they start a company, don't really think about that there are 10 things that can happen to it at the end of the day. And in my experience, each of these 10 things really have almost a different way that you should be constructing your company, particularly your management system and potentially your culture. So just to quickly go through this list, the eventual outcome of your company could be to IPO. It could be to sell to a strategic buyer. It could be to sell to a financial buyer. The difference between those are a strategic buyer is someone who's probably in your industry who would be buying you to make their business better. A financial buyer would be typically a private equity person or someone in the financial community who is clearly buying you to possibly do a roll-up, make something bigger, but it's all financially based. You could sell it to a partner. You can sell it to your employees. That is called an ESOP. This is an extremely growing movement right now, particularly for women, and particularly for women who do not have family members. Very strong indications that many women are interested in actually setting up methods to be selling their companies to their employees through an ESOP. You can sell it to just the management group, similar kind of philosophy. And of course, you can build this company to transfer it to family members. You can hire someone to run it for you, or you could liquidate and go bankrupt. I don't think too many of us want those as our options. But again, looking back at this list, when you start, that you think about which is going to be best for you, it really is some indication of how you should be building your culture. If you're interested in selling to a strategic buyer, then you have to be really well known in your industry. You should be making really good connections with anyone in your industry. You want to probably have a reputation of being an ethical, sort of giving person. You want to have a reputation that your company is the best and expert. If you're interested in selling to a financial buyer, then you have to be obsessed by numbers, profitability, growth plans, very, very rigid on being sure that everything can be figured out with numbers. Selling to a partner, obviously choosing a partner well is the secret to doing that. If you want to sell to employees, then you have to have a culture where you're sharing your numbers and your decisions with your employees to start teaching them how your company works and what to do. Same thing with management. If you have an interest of transferring to family members, it's a very good idea to start bringing your children into the company really at quite a young age. A lot of research for successful family transitions is the children start sort of hanging out at the business, when they're 5, 6, 7, just to get a sense of what's happening, and sort of picking up that this is part of their future. Hiring someone to run it and staying at home, or kicking yourself upstairs, or moving out to do other things is also something that another number of entrepreneurs are doing. In my latest white paper, Flight Paths, which I was done for UBS, I studied the longer journey of entrepreneurs, and I studied 8 incredible people who had sold companies or brought in other people to run them, and then took their entrepreneur skills into entirely new domains to solve major social, education, and other problems. So one of my personal mantras right now is really to encourage people who have this entrepreneur skill to think about that you might actually have a responsibility, even if you don't want to sell your company, of potentially bringing someone in to run it and taking those skills out to start working on fixing something else in another domain. The sixth thing that I wanted to talk about is that entrepreneur success is not often funded by VCs. One of my specialties is organic growth, and also one of my specialties is knowing about ultra high net worth people. There are a number of studies that actually really focus on how people get rich. And what I like to always stress is still, particularly in the United States, significant wealth, and I'm talking about wealth over 20 or $30 million, is far more likely to be self-made than inherited. Only about 10% of wealth is inherited. It's the old adage that people of money tend to have problems after the 3rd generation. So I just really, would like to encourage that money is not necessary to be successful as an entrepreneur. But I also want to stress that having what you hear on television, Shark Tank, and some of the more kind of mainstream media things, that the road is to get angel investing and investors in whatever, is not really the norm. Only about 10% of companies and people who really sell for large dollars are funded by venture capitalists. I also like to really highlight that many entrepreneurs are getting very kind of aware that we really are 2 what I call separate tribes. The financial tribe is very, very motivated by profit. But I think as we have evolved, particularly coming out of COVID, you see business owners and entrepreneurs being even more caring about all those P's, the profit, yes, but people, planet, purpose, and really solving the problems as being equally or even more motivating. Another movement that I'm definitely seeing coming out of COVID is what's known as the B Corp movement. For those of you who are not aware of this, there is a new way to start. Well, it's not really new, but it's becoming a more popular way that right from the start, when you incorporate your business, you can put in your corporation papers that you are starting it as a benefit corporation, which means it's for profit, but you're also telling the world and any future investors that you will be holding values of caring for people and the planet as important as profit. So if you're motivated in this kind of way, do check out the B Corp movement, or some even getting certified as a benefit corporation. There's like 100 check marks and questions. It's a really good list of the things you can do to do that. So let's go on to the seventh tip that I have, which kind of builds on this. In my experience, it's extremely hard to get money from strangers until you've put in at least $100,000 of sweat equity and exhausted your family and your friends' money, and certainly at least have revenues. That's another kind of myth, I think, that all you have to do is kind of begin, win a few contests, and money will come. Again, organic growth, building something is the way to do that. There are so many new ways to get money to help you along the way. Crowdfunding, Kickstarter campaigns, finding a strategic partner, finding a customer to prepay you as a beta. The government has incredible programs called SBIRs, which are for innovation and research project, huge grants. There are tons of contests now. And of course, there's a number of incubators and accelerators that one can join to help on this journey. In my opinion, though, two of the most important things that one needs when one starts a company is first, a ton of social media connections, particularly if you're doing anything in the consumer world. In my experience, anyone who starts something in the consumer world needs at least 5,000 social media connections to really have a successful Kickstarter crowdsourcing campaign. I also really like to highlight having the best credit score that you can certainly is a tip for helping you on the entrepreneur journey. Let's go on to 8 now, and let's now talk a little bit about creating value. So the secret of creating value is very simple. It's putting everything in writing. And what this means actually is to have a process and checklist for everything, have job descriptions, policies for treating people, processes for how you're getting your marketing pipeline. Putting things in writing from day one is the secret of creating value. Once you do that, you are creating something that is sellable. You have to get what you're doing out of your head and onto a process and paper for it to have value. I also recommend right from the beginning to download what's known as a due diligence list. This is the list of documents that anyone would check and the checklist if they wanted to buy your company. And so one of my tips is to right from the beginning, download a due diligence checklist, start file folders on your computer. And as you even do simple emails, simple job descriptions, have meetings on mission, vision, goals, policy, processes, you can put them in those folders and have an automatic due diligence sort of room ready to go. Okay, let's continue on value with my tip number 9. So some of my kind of tips, again, for creating value at the end of the day is number 1, you have to have crystal clear clarity on how you are unique. there should be at least 3 things that you can identify as your total brand. And it also is a really good idea to take the time and write down, what do you guarantee a customer will experience if they do business with you? And what are you willing to do if they don't have that experience? Uniqueness with this guarantee is a way to create value. 2 of my other favorite kind of quick tips for getting focused. One of my favorite things to do this time of the year, as you're starting to build goals for the next year, is build your plan for next year by asking yourself, your employees, your advisors 4 questions, the 4 Bs. And it's very simple. What can I do to become the best in my industry or business? What can I do to become the biggest? What can I do to become the boldest? Meaning, what can I do to take a little chance and make me stand out in the crowd that way? And what can I do to become the broadest? By that, what can I do to expand my customer base? The other thing that I like to also think about is when you're branding yourself, brand is always about 1 of 5 things. It's about whether you get the reputation of having the best people, the best product, the best infrastructure, the best process, or the best social cause. Again, being really clear right from the beginning, which of those brands you want as part of your identity is a way to differentiate yourself, to make you stand out in the crowd. Number 10, a few tips on management. So these again are some of my real simple tips. If we can go to slide 10, the rule of 3s. I believe, and there's science about, well, first there is science that none of us can be committed to do more than 3 things in any time period. And the longest time period that we can be committed to is 90 days. So it is, in my opinion, worth thinking about what are the 3 biggest things you're thinking of doing in 2023. But more important, it's important to think about what are the 3 things that you have to get done by the end of the year. And then you go deeper and deeper. You think the first of the month, what are the 3 things I need to do this month? On Sunday night, you think of the 3 things you need to do this week. And I, in my life, wake up every morning and write down the 3 things that I have to do today that are even tiny steps to those 3 big goals that I have for the year. Also, when I ran my companies, everyone in my company knew this. Everyone knew what our 3 big goals were for the year. They knew the 3 big goals their department had for the quarter, the month, the week. They also knew that if they ran into me on the elevator or if I had a Zoom call with them, the first thing I would ask is, what are the 3 things you are doing today to move all of us forward on our goals? It's an incredible way, and it's very easy to get total alignment with everyone in your company. And you also, of course, have the benefit that people are thinking about what they want to do before they come to work. Second thing that I like to highlight, there's an incredible document you can find online, which is called the 10 Levels of Delegation. The hardest thing that an entrepreneur founder has to learn is how to delegate. And there actually is a document that can tell you whether this is a level 1 delegation, which means you can do whatever you want with it, or it's a number 10, which means I really want you to check in with me on everything. It was one of my transforming documents that helped me become a much better manager. And then my last tip for managing is to never have a problem. My culture in all my companies were that nobody could ever come into my office and tell me we had a problem. The language always had, no matter what happened, that we have an incredible opportunity. An example of that is when I had Acoustic Guide, we had the National Gallery as a client, and a shipment of our batteries came in from China that were faulty, and in the middle of the night started to burn. And of course, put an incredibly horrible smell in the entire National Gallery. Plus, it could have actually caused a fire. Luckily, it didn't. The people who had first learned about that problem came to me with the language, "Oh, Barbara, we have an incredible opportunity today." And by saying that, it turned everyone's mind to the fact that we had to be apologetic. We had to work with the customer. We had to be honest. We had to realize that how we handled that problem actually could be an incredible opportunity that the National Gallery would talk about our amazing service, care, and whatever. And that is the way it came out. Number 11, growth. This is something there's two things that are very much on my mind that I read in the last few months. McKinsey has written a great report that you can find online, The 12 Secrets of Growth. But part of that report, they did research and they showed that only 1 out of 8 companies in the 10 years before COVID actually had growth more than 10% a year. I think many business owners kind of feel that if I don't do 10% a year, I am a nightmare. In actual fact, only 1 in 8 companies had that record. The actual average and typical growth rate for a company in the 10 years before COVID was only 2.8%. Now, of course, with inflation, there is a necessity to grow higher than that. That was a low inflation part, but I do want to make the point that high growth is not really the norm. In fact, you really have to work hard on it. I also came back from an interesting growth conference and had an amazing paper which presented that the secret of growth was on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis to be obsessed by 3 things. And I just share with you that maybe at a typical check-in or management meeting, you ask your managers, what did you do this week or what are you doing this month to innovate, to do something new? Second thing, what did you do today or what are you going to do this month to proactively solve a potential problem? And the last thing, which is very important, particularly coming out of COVID, is what are we doing in this company to help our employees build their personal resilience and also to make our company more resilient. I love this idea of these innovation, proactivity, and resilience being the secret of growth. And for just my last tip that I want to talk about, number 12, which is another one of my kind of mantras, is every business owner needs these 3 things. If you have employees, if you have revenues, you have the responsibility of, you must have a will. What happens to your company if something, God forbid, happens to you? Think of COVID. Also think of COVID. If you had gone on an incubator, how would your bills be paid? Who has financial power of attorney? And obviously be sure you have a medical proxy. I'm coming to just a conclusion and we'll take a few questions in a minute or two, but let's go to the next slide, which is just a quick highlight of my work on women entrepreneurs. You can find all of my white papers by connecting with me on LinkedIn, but one there is Women Entrepreneurs, which I did for Bank of America US Trust, interviewed about 20, and yes, you can get the slides. I'm seeing that message come up. I interviewed about 20 women for this white paper, and it was amazing to me of the similarities with all of them. Only 1 of the 20 had chosen to take outside equity. At least 3/4 of the women I interviewed, and I'm talking about women who built and sold their companies for over 15 million, up to 100 million in revenues. All of them shared that they had been approached by equity people, but they just really did not find the culture. They didn't like the questions they were being asked. They felt they would lose too much control of their values by taking outside equity. So there is a lot that women don't get our fair share of VC and PE money, But we also have to remember that perhaps some of it is women choosing that. Some hope that as women sell companies and become our own PE people, that we may have more values closer to women. The other thing I noticed is, when I did these cases, is right from the beginning, almost every woman gave a % of her profits to a women's cause, like domestic violence, trafficking, child abuse. It was very interesting to me that as we create wealth, we are so driven to also give a piece of our wealth back to pull up others along with us. Women-owned companies tended to have better and more generous employee benefits. We definitely put more money into creating a better product and service at the expense of profit. One of the things that I really enjoyed hearing a number of times from women is that we truly wanted feedback. A number of women actually mentioned to me that their male competitors often asked for feedback, but they found that if they gave negative feedback, all it would do is turn the male competitor into a defender of what he was doing. So I just thought that was an interesting thing, that we have that extra kind of maybe a bias to really listening and wanting to get feedback and grow. And then the last thing that I mentioned already, I'm seeing a big trend with women entrepreneurs to look to becoming benefit corporation and ESOP. So let's just go to my last slide, which I think should be my quotes. Thank you. Oh, no, it's my big point. Okay, so we have been talking about entrepreneurship, and I bet there's a few people on this call who have a secret desire to start a company and whatever, and they are not doing it. And the reason is, if we can go to the next slide, it is that you have the curse of perfection. It is one of the things that most holds us back from being what we can do. And I just want to just so stress that you cannot start a company. You cannot be an entrepreneur. You cannot be an innovator. You cannot be the first person to do anything if you are driven by perfection. If you try something new, if you are the first, it is not going to work out the way you want the first time. You cannot think of everything that it can happen. So just go for it and recognize that there is no expectation of perfection when you're an innovator, an entrepreneur. Failure is not in our vocabulary. If things do not quite go the way you want, you should celebrate, you should learn from it, you should be happy that you're one step closer. So last slide is my quotes. If Nick, we can go to that. And so these are my favorite quotes. The only way we can have the future we want is to create it ourselves. There is a special place in hell for women who do not help other women. Obsessively about that now. And my favorite one recently that I've been thinking is that any problem that mankind created, a woman can fix. So these are the conclusion of my comments. We're going to take a few questions in a few minutes. But Nick, if you want to go to the last slide, I don't know if we want to show the resources yet, or do we want to come back and show that?
We're going to share the resources in the chat box.
Okay, so I'll just quickly share with you what you're going to find. My last slide of this presentation, which you're going to be receiving, lists all the resources available. Oh, thank you. Next slide. Yeah, these are all the resources that Joy and I have identified for you that are available around Columbia. With links. There's my email and my LinkedIn. The Lang Center for Entrepreneurship is a gold mine, particularly for Columbia alums. They do a special newsletter every other week with everything that's going on at Columbia that could benefit an alumni entrepreneur. If you go into their website, which is the next tip, Google the Lang Center Columbia, there is a resource map that goes on for pages that tells you about all the courses you can take for free at Columbia. I am an official mentor there. I post at least 8 hours a month to meet with anyone in the Columbia community. There's at least 15 more of us that you can make appointments there. They have Friday office hours for alums that you can Zoom in and ask any questions about help. 37 Angels is written weekly by Angela Lee, who's our faculty head of entrepreneurship in the business school. It's the weekly list of startup and investor events in New York. The Columbia Venture Community, Joy can tell you something about. She's an active member of that. Columbia Engineering also has an entrepreneurship letter, and Columbia Engineering actually has started a Build It Lab where you can try to find student coders to help you. And also there's 3D printing facilities, a number of resources available in the engineering school that you can learn about through this newsletter. And then the last thing is that Columbia has one of the best small business development centers in the United States. Anywhere that you are, you should Google small business development centers, and you would find that many universities have these centers funded by the federal SBA, incredible resources for helping you get bank loans, clean up your credit, getting very, very inexpensive courses to help you with your business. So Joy, that is all I wanted to say for sure. So let's open to any questions that have come our way.
Barbara, that was great.
Thank
It's
you.
always a pleasure hearing you, and you always bring such valuable practical insight. And also I like your emphasis on the impact that women have made, not just in terms of their role, but in terms of giving back the community in many ways. So, and you're a perfect example of it. Here are a couple of questions that came through. There's one concern about, going full head into entrepreneurship for people who don't have the luxury to do that. So for those who don't have that luxury to quit their jobs and start their businesses right away, as many accelerators seem to have this expectation that you're working on this full time, what would your advice be to those founders?
I actually, I do run groups for the Women's President Organization. I've been doing that also for 20 years, way before entrepreneurship even had a name. And it is very common for people to start companies or businesses on a part-time basis on weekends or in the evening. So I think you certainly can do the work of learning about a business model canvas, doing a business model canvas, going out and doing your customer discovery, your customer interviews. And what happens in that process is you will start maybe finding people who might even be able to fund you. So I think it's extremely possible to start a company while you're still working. In fact, I actually would recommend that. In my own life, I kind of abruptly quit from working on Wall Street. And I regret that in a way, because I realize now that if I had thought about that I wanted to move to be in entrepreneurship, I actually could have taken advantage of working in that place to use that, my position to actually open doors for me to talk to people. I was a research analyst, and for those of you who are a student or you're doing, calling people and telling them that you're doing some research on something is a way to get secret information. Sometimes you can get people to talk to you more and share information while you're still working. So I don't recommend just jumping in and quitting your job. I do recommend going slower and whatever. And again, if you look around, there's an awful lot of programs funded. New York City has WeConnect, has a program called Fast Track. There, small business development centers. There's a number of programs you can find that can go on. Hofstra, we have in New York State, we have what's known as entrepreneur assistance centers. There's 22 of them throughout New York State. I actually was just asked by New York State Economic Development Corporation to write that program. That is a 10-week program in the evening to show up and help you start your business. So there is tons of, you do not have to quit your job to get started on this. In fact, I would recommend not doing that and unless you really know that you've got some customers lined up and you have the financial resources.
And we have one question asking about what resources might be available outside of your area.
I strongly recommend just Google Entrepreneur Assistance Centers. That tends to be a word that states use. Again, the small business development centers are everywhere in the United States. They're funded by the federal, the SBA. I definitely would sign on to the SBA website. They do a ton of free courses. And I absolutely just Google help for entrepreneurs, help for startups. I guarantee that just about every university in the United States now has an entrepreneurship center or something happening in entrepreneurship. So if you set your mind or you just do some simple Googling on, I want to start a business in Idaho, I want to start a business in Newport, Rhode Island, you will get resources that are very reasonably priced to do this. This is a phenomena that particularly has happened, I would say, even during COVID, that people, the governments realize helping people transition. And also, I think it's the mood of the world that people want to work for themselves. And so there's tremendous growth in that area. I think we probably have about, I'm up for maybe 5 more minutes. We're a little over our time, but happy to take 1 or 2 more questions, Joy.
Barbara, what was it that prompted you to go from working for others, and especially on all of your breakthrough roles, to working for yourself and creating these businesses?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. When I look back on my career on Wall Street, I actually, every job I had was a new job. I was asked to start like when in the old days, a few years up there were only stocks and bonds. When I first started working on Wall Street, stocks, simple bonds was all that Wall Street sold. So when Wall Street started selling more complicated products, when they started selling commodities, or they started selling insurance, or they started thinking that they wanted to have more portfolio management or whatever, I was always the person who was put there to start. So I was an entrepreneur first. I actually left Wall Street at a time when there was a certain amount of corruption. Ivan Boesky was around. And I also was personally witnessed of stuff where people were getting kickbacks on deals and whatever. And it was my first decision was to leave Wall Street, that there were certain, I just was feeling culturally, I was always very outspoken to help women get movement, but I was the first woman a million times in rooms and whatever, and I just at some point it just wore me down, and I thought, I think I should leave this. I think it's costing a little bit too much on my health. I actually was given the opportunity to learn about entrepreneurship by someone that I met and subsequently married. He was the first true entrepreneur that I met. He had built and sold a number of companies. He actually allowed me to run one of his small companies as sort of a wedding present, which was kind of funny. So that's kind of the honest truth of how I moved from Wall Street to entrepreneurship. But I also will say, I absolutely I cannot work for anyone. Even when I work totally as an independent contractor, I totally work, for doing tons of speaking and setting up programs for universities. And I have to make it pretty clear that please let me just do my thing. I'm happy to get your input, but I'm really not good at taking instructions from others.
Well, you're really good at giving valuable advice. Do we have time for one more question, Barbara?
I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay. So this question came in. What advice do you have if you've created a firm that's successful, but you're feeling stuck on how to move to major growth?
I think I gave a few just simple tips. Actually, going back to some of the exercises I gave, I mean, doing a business model canvas can be, I love the 4B questions of really thinking clearly how you can be the best, how you can be bigger, how you can be bolder, how you can be broader. I also definitely would recommend a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. It's Wyckman. I found that his work about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's a very simple book, and it's an amazing process for how to do a retreat to get really clear with you and your employees on your mission, where you can go, what can happen. So I would throw that out. But actually, if you're stuck, the biggest thing I think is I compliment you for being on this call, because I really think the biggest thing when you're stuck is potentially to look around at conferences or learning opportunities. I mean, Inc. magazine does tons of great conferences. Fast Company just did an innovation here in New York. So I think if you're really stuck and you need a shake up, always trying to learn something or put yourself in a new environment, or maybe doing a focus group with the customers and people closest to you, but are some of the ways that I would use to shake up. And also, of course, you can find there's growth coaches around. I do that kind of work, and it's very easy to Google growth coach, and there's a lot. Scaling Up is another good program by Vern Harnish, and these people who are certified or can help with or are called growth gurus. So that's another option.
Also, one thing I've found as well when working with so many founders over the years is that people can limit themselves in terms of who can possibly use their products and services. You really need to take a step back and say, what are the benefits that people are getting from this? How are people using this product? And who else in adjacent markets can benefit from that? So just having that awareness of this transferability, perhaps across sectors of your offering, can be this big aha. And then from there, you think, well, how am I going to access them? What am I going to do to get there?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
So fantastic. Well, Barbara, this has been wonderful as always. Any opportunity to listen to Barbara in any capacity is one that I welcome, and all of you should welcome as well, as you have experienced. Words of wisdom for sure, and a kind heart, and an incredibly talented advisor. So thank you, Barbara. Even though you do not have a piece of paper that says Columbia, you are definitely part of our community. And
I feel that way, and I have to say, when I got the invitation from the Columbia Alumni Association to be a keynote on entrepreneurship, it was one of my highest honors, and then to be asked to come back again. So I am feeling that I'm an honorary. Maybe I guess I'll have to start lobbying for an honorary degree. So if anyone on this call can start planting that notion.
All right.
That'd be great.
You have earned it.
I just wanted to also again highlight that I do give at least 8 hours a month to talk to anyone connected in the Columbia community. You do that by going to the Lang Center. There's a whole site there that you hit the advisor's name, and then my calendar comes up. I tend to post those hours on the 30th of the month. So I'll be posting November hours shortly. And also please connect with me on LinkedIn. I answer any messages or whatever. And then of course, if I can ever help you facilitate a retreat for growth, I do work as a coach, consultant, in addition to giving free time to Columbia people. I welcome hearing from anyone that I might be able to help on their journey. So thank you so much, Columbia, Joy, Nick, for helping me with this.
Wonderful, Barbara. And thank you all for attending tonight's event. We tried to get through to most of the questions. I know we didn't get through all of them, but I think we got through almost all of them. And I'd like to let you all know about the next event. There is an in-person event at the Manhattanville Lenfest Center for Arts on Wednesday, November 2nd from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is a very special collaborative event with the Columbia School of Nursing and the Black Alumni Council named Reflections on Reproductive Justice with Faye Waddleton, who's class of 68 from the nursing school. So we hope to see many of you there. And good night to everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you to everyone who helped put this together. We hope to see you at the next event.
And thank you for all the lovely comments in the chat box. Thank you. I appreciate them.